Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Art and Recap. I'm your artist Faye, and today we are reading chapter 162 to 166 of Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 162 is called Intense Sunlight. So we are actually at the Moors Cathedral right now, and we are waiting out with Klein for about 15 minutes because he's like, I want to start doing my thing with, creating the sacred sun emblem, but I don't want Kenley and Leonard to randomly pop in after 15 minutes or within 15 minutes because they forgot to tell me something and find out that I'm doing some weird ass shenanigans in the church. So he's like, I'm gonna wait this out and then see what happens, right? So he waits there, and after 20 minutes pass, he's like, it is time. And you know what? When I was reading that, I was like, wait, he's actually gonna do this in the cathedral? Like the Evernight Goddess's cathedral? Like the goddess that's signified by moonlight, darkness, and whatever? The complete opposite of the sun god? That's like mad disrespectful, Klein. What the hell? Because in the Donghua, I remember that he was actually performing this ritual in the ship where they fought that Beyonder that lost control, which was Old Neil's friend, and that actually never happened in the novel. So here we are. A little tidbit of information that I find fascinating that we got from this chapter is the fact that none of the old traditional gods ever left behind an actual image, meaning there's no statue of them that people can visualize. They have like emblems, signifiers, whatever, signs basically, kind of like brand logos. That's all they left behind. And I find that fascinating because it's like if they ever walk the earth, then people will, they can walk freely. People will not have to be like, oh my god, you look like the sun goddess or something like that, right? Or the sun god, whatever. So they can walk freely amongst humans. But at the same time, it says here it's like a manifestation of the command, do not look directly at God, which I also find fascinating. It's like super interesting, this little tidbit of information, and I feel like it's important in the future. It's just a hinge. A hinge? A hunch? A hunch. What is a hinge? A hunch. It's a hunch. Okay. So anyway, Klein performs the ritual turned away from the altar of the Evernight Goddess because he feels guilty about this thing that he's about to do, because again, it's mad disrespectful. He's literally performing a sun ritual in her house. Like, hello? So it's like, this is understandable that you should be feeling guilty about this. The ritual was of course a success, and one thing that this chapter showed us that was also not shown in the Donghua is the fact that Leonard and Kenley actually felt that something different was going on. Like there was an intense sunlight that shone outside, and they're like, weird weather. And you know what? I think Leonard is sussing out Klein in this section because he looked at the cathedral, which, I was like, why would he look over there when the sun is shining outside, right? So that was weird. And this hunch of mine was, amplified when Klein, he was done with his, ritual, and he just rested a little bit. He was like sweating like hell. And then a couple minutes or hours later, Leonard was going to take his shift because he's now going to be, taking over the sealed artifact 30782. And when Leonard got the artifact, he was confused because it was weird. He felt that something was wrong with that. So I was like, Leonard definitely knows something is wrong, which is probably why he didn't think much of it when Klein used the artifact, the emblem, right? When they were fighting that guy in the Donghua. The guy that killed them, basically. So yeah. So once Klein went back home, he actually finds that there's a stranger in his house, and he's like, who the fuck are you? But it turns out that she's actually one of the maids that did the test for them to find someone who wants to learn how to cook. And she passed with flying colors, naturally, and Benson actually explained to us that there were 3 people who they were, thinking about hiring. But ultimately, she was the one that was chosen because she was a believer of the goddess of Evernight, and the other 2 were believers of the Lord of Storms. And Melissa felt uncomfortable hiring someone from the Lord of Storms because she again does not appreciate their beliefs about how women should act, right? And I totally understand that. I get you, Melissa, but at the same time, Melissa Girly Pop, that's low-key religious discrimination, isn't it? And then the next day, Klein went to work and he finds out from Roseanne that old Neil is sick. And when I read that, I was like, oh no, it's starting, isn't it? That scene, that part of the story where old Neil dies is starting. And yeah, that's basically what happens in the next chapter. Chapter 163 is called Various Signs. So in the previous chapter, actually we find out that old Neil low-key lied to Klein that he was married and that he has a piano and is playing the piano, and Roseanne was like, what the fuck do you mean? Old Neil was never married and there was no piano in his house. And apparently that's because Roseanne visited old Neil's place just last like half a year ago, not half a month ago. So she visited him earlier this month with another clerk that works for them, and apparently there was no piano there, and he never married. He was still a bachelor. And Klein was like, what do you mean? I visited old Neil's place just last month and there was a piano there and he told me he was married. And so he's like, what is going on here? Why did old Neil lie to me, right? So he divines old Neil's situation and finds out that there's something wrong with old Neil. And he remembers that the first time he was actually taught a lesson with old Neil, like when he first drank his potion, old Neil showed him how to open his spirit vision, right? He saw some mysterious, creepy ass being behind old Neil and various other things, and old Neil was like, oh no, don't worry about that. It's just, it's a normal thing that happens when you're looking with your spirit vision, right? Nothing suspicious at all. So he's like piecing together all these things. It's like, holy shit, old Neil lied to me from the very beginning. What is going on here? So then Klein rushes over to Captain Dunes, who was drinking his coffee and almost choked to death because of how Klein slammed open the door to tell him that there's something wrong with old Neil and that they should really go and visit him and check up on him, right? And Captain Dune is like, wait, what do you mean? Did old Neil lose control? And Klein's like, no, but he's on the brink of it. I know, because that's basically what he divined, right? Like, he didn't outright divine if old Neil lost control. They took Royale with them, and that's because they wanted to bring with them sealed artifact number 0611, which is, the artifact that makes you depressed, basically, the one with the hair. And the only reason that they can do that is if they are in a team of 3 or 4, right? It's like the same with the sun emblem, basically. The trio then heads over to old Neil's old bungalow house, and they knock, they ring a bell, and it was quiet, and Klein tries to lighten the mood and says perhaps old Neil went to visit a doctor and isn't at home, but then he continues to ring the bell, and you know what? Blood literally started seeping from underneath the door, like the crack between the door and the floor. It started seeping down, and Clem was like, I guess he's here. So here's the thing, that chapter is completely different from what happened in the Donghua, which threw me a little bit off, because in the Donghua, I remember that Klein actually became a clown first, and then they went over to old Neil's storyline, because the reason why everybody was there at old Neil's is because they wanted to celebrate Klein becoming a clown, right? And here in the novel, it was actually flipped around, and Kenley and Leonard and Roseanne weren't even in the vicinity of old Neil's house. So I was like, what the hell? Because again, it kind of, in the Donghua, they made it a lot more dangerous because they weren't really expecting old Neil to be, going berserk soon or something. They had a hint, they had a hunch that something was going on, but they were hopeful that it's not, he's not gone completely, right? But then I remember that one of the characters, Leonard, I think, was sent back to the headquarters to actually grab the sealed artifact that they needed to fight Old Neil in the Donghua, which didn't happen here at all. They came planned with that artifact already because Klein actually knows about this artifact, and I think it would have actually been better if the artifact has been, hinted at that it exists, because this is a problem that I find with Lord of the Mysteries, is that randomly artifacts are just thrown around. Like, I know that Klein learned about all of this, and that again, he knows about this because he is a learned man. He reads and he does his research. But at the same time, I feel like that cuttlefish writes it off screen, and it doesn't really hint at us that they exist. It's just they're like deus ex machinas, basically, that whenever Klein needs something, it just gets thrown in there, right? So I would have appreciated it if actually it was hinted at us from the very beginning that, hey, this actually exists. Maybe we could have a chapter where Klein was reading all of these artifacts, and we get a glimpse or like a writing that says, hey, this is that, and we'll be like, okay, those exist. So that when this chapter comes along, Klein remembers that artifact, and we can be like, oh right, that exists, yeah, totally use it for that, right? So yeah, just a little bit of a thing that I wanted to mention. Unless, of course, this was all foreshadowed in the previous chapters already and they just didn't pick up on it. That could also be possible. It's also possible that I forgot about it, but I don't know. Tell me guys, if I forgot about it, if they actually even hinted about this artifact long before this event happened. Chapter 164 is called Miserable Wretches. Okay, so we are now in front of Old Neil's house, right? And Old Neil and Captain Dunes are speaking with each other. Captain Dunes is like very soft, he's gentle, and he's trying to convince Old Neil to open the door himself, right? And let them in, because he's like a vampire. He can't just kick the door open and let himself in. But I'm joking, guys. I'm joking. I know that Captain Dunes is doing this so that Old Neil doesn't go berserk, because clearly there is something wrong going on with Old Neil, because he's like trying to convince them that what he did is not wrong, and he's never harmed anyone, just like how his mystery prior Maxim says, you can do whatever you want but do no harm, yada yada yada. And he's really trying to convince them that everything is fine, nothing is wrong. Come back tomorrow. Once you come back tomorrow, you're going to see I'm fine. Everything is a-okay, guys. And Captain Dune is like, yes, of course, I know what you mean, but please let us in. We're here to visit you. We're just trying to make sure you're okay because we heard you're sick, right? And Old Neil was like, no. And he somehow started recollecting, well, not really recollecting, but he's like explaining what he did, like why he's doing this is because his fiance Celeste died of a terminal illness, and he couldn't save her when he was still younger, because again, he wasn't a master of mysticism back then, right? But now he knows there's this god whispering in his ears that apparently he can revive her with the alchemical formula, yada yada yada. And he said that actually this is like totally normal, like sequence 4 beyonders from the Church of Earth Mother are really good at this. This kind of hints of the fact that the people of the Church Mother are necromancers. Are they necromancers? Are we getting Weywushian here? And also something about the 7th pathway that can do this. So I'm like, girl, what is going on here? So he was like, I'm going to summon her spirit and pray for gods to help to combine her spirit and body together. And I was like, dude, I don't think that will work. But whatever, you do you, I guess. And Old Neil and Captain is like, yes, that is a brilliant idea. Perhaps we can help you if you let us in. We are friends, right? So anyway, after convincing each other back and forth like that, Old Neil finally relents and opens the door. And the door opens with a creak, slowly. And Klein, he sees everything is bloody. There's blood and hair everywhere. It was sticky, it was gross, and it probably also smells like iron. That was not described, but considering the fact that there is blood and hair everywhere, definitely would have smelled like iron. And in the background, a piano was playing. Old Neil's head was hanging in the air, connected to the ceiling by a thick liquid, and his forehead and cheeks each had a pair of eyes, and they were cold and ruthless with no eyelashes. And it was like the same eyes that Klein saw when he first opened his spirit vision from the very beginning of the novel. So Old Neil tells Captain Dune that, hey, look, I'm totally fine, I'm totally okay. And I'm like, sure, Jan, you are a head floating in the air. Like, what the fuck do you mean? So it's clear that he's out of his mind already. And at some point, Captain Dune is trying to drag him into a dream, right? Because his eyes shimmered silver. Captain Dune then asks him, where did you learn this alchemical formula? And Old Neil tells him that he found out about it from the Hidden Sage. And Klein's like, Hidden Sage? Isn't that the god that the Moses ascetic order believes in? The one that has the complete mystery prior pathway? Upon hearing the Hidden Sage, Old Neil was like, oh shoot. He's like finally awakened from this mind fog that he found himself in, and he realized, oh, I did become a monster already, shoot. So he starts begging them to let him go, to let him live. He's going to run away in the mountains and live peacefully with his wife that he resurrected, if he was successful in his resurrection, of course. And then he realized that Captain Dunes was pulling him into a dream, and they had, a banter, yada yada yada, because it wasn't really that much of a fight, let's just say it like this, because Captain Dunes dropped the artifact that they took with them, the hair depression artifact, and it activated, and it made Old Neil sleepy and not want to fight anymore, right? So here's the thing. There were actually only 2 gunshots that was described in this novel. So apparently Captain Dunes and Royale were the only ones who actually shot Old Neil. I don't think Klein shot him, because otherwise he would have probably been talking about it more and be more depressed, right? But anyway, once Old Neil was dead, all the blood seeped back into him, and Dune looked at Old Neil's corpse and also said his catchline that he also said in the Donghua, which is, we are guardians, but also a bunch of miserable wretches that are constantly fighting against threats and madness. And you guys know that was actually a line that Klein really took to heart and kind of realized that, oh shoot, one day I am going to go mad, right? Chapter 165 is called Epitaph. So in this chapter, Captain Dunes tells Royale and Klein to look around the house to see if they can find hints of what caused Old Neil to go into this madness, right? And Klein actually found a note from Old Neil saying that that has the recipes written for this alchemical formula, and that he actually used his own blood instead of using other people's blood as sacrifice, because again, the mystery prior's maxim says, do no harm, right? Do whatever you want, but do no harm. But the thing is, he did harm someone. He harmed himself. And I don't know if that also counts, but So the next day, I'm guessing this is the next day, by the way, they buried Old Neil, and Klein afterwards went on with his day, because again, the world moves on, and he started doing his shooting range practices, and he went to the Knight Gawain, his physical mentor, right, that trains him martial arts and whatever, how to fight basically. And Gawain was like, what's wrong with you, bruh? And Klein was like, I'm sorry teacher, I'm a little down today. And he asked why, what happened, And Klein explains that a friend of his passed away suddenly, and Gawain was like, yeah, I also lost friends. I lost a lot of friends. I lost 325 friends of mine in the span of 5 minutes, and amongst those 325 people, 10 of them I could trust with my life. And Klein's like, okay. Is this a competition now? No, Klein didn't say that, but I was thinking that in my head. But he's like, that is the cruelty of war, is what Klein actually said and what he realized, right? And Gawain, they had a small heart to heart, and Klein was like, thank you, teacher, for this wisdom, yada yada yada. And Gawain's like, yeah, good, now do those things that you were doing again, but 10 times. Now go. And Klein's like, what? Didn't you just tell me that this practice of ours isn't supposed to be, hard, and I shouldn't be taking my frustration out on this? What? Then on Friday morning, Sika, Klein, Freya, they were around the area where they usually play cards at, but they're not playing cards because they are in their depression era. And Klein was trying to read the newspaper, but he couldn't really focus. And then Captain Dunes opens the door and was like, Klein, come here for a second. And Klein's like, oh, what's going on? What happened? And Captain Dunes then explains that the examiner from the Vatican, the Vatican? The Vatican. The examiner from the Holy Cathedral is here. The Vatican. Chapter 166 is called Examination. And here we are on our way with Captain Dunes towards the examiner. And Captain Dunes is giving us the down low of who the examiner is, what to expect basically. And we find out that the examiner is actually a high-ranking deacon of the Nighthawks, which is Crested Sesimir. His name is Crested Sesimir. Why is his name so hard to pronounce? And apparently there's like 22 ladies and gentlemen that are all equal in ranking at the deaconess of the Evernight Goddess, and yada yada yada. We find out that Crested is only a sequence 5 beyonder, and he's not a demigod yet, so Klein doesn't need to worry about all that. And Captain Dunes also says that actually the guy is actually really friendly. He had a chat with him and he seems nice. So Klein's like, okay, I can read between the lines, Captain. Thank you so much for, giving me all these hints, basically. So he meets this Reverend Sesimir. They had a chat and then he started examining Klein really quickly. Like the first one is like if he mastered the potion at all, right? And Klein's like, nah, yeah, I did master it, and he's like very confident about it, which Crested smiled and he appreciates the confidence, and he's like, okay, I did the examination, you passed the first test. And Klein's like, whoa, this guy actually was like examining me the whole time and I didn't feel anything, what the hell, right? So then they had to like observe Klein's mind, if Klein is seeing anything or hearing any suspicious things that he's not supposed to be seeing or hearing, and he also passed that. And then the guy started also singing, which is weird. Yeah, and his singing was not good. Apparently it was very awful, and Klein was like, silence sure is great. Yeah, anyway, Klein passed all the tests with flying colors, and it doesn't sound like he was being tortured, unlike in the donghua, because in the donghua it sounded like he was being tortured. Here it's just like very casual. Honestly, it reminded me of my examination to pass the graphic design test. Yeah, so I don't know, it was very chill actually. And of course, Crested asked about his inspiration, about the maxim of the mystery priors, and also Dali's examples. And Klein elaborates and explains that yes, one of my teammates, he was a mystery prior and he was abiding at the at their rules, and he said that they have a lower probability of losing control because of that, yada yada yada. And after that, he heard that Madame Dali once said that she wanted to be a real spirit medium and that she was a genius that leveled up to sequence 7 within 2 years. So I was like, hey, what if I actually become a real seer, like how she wanted to become a real spirit medium, right? Asset asked him, well, that's great and all, but did you share your experience with any of your teammates, these ideas and all that? And Klein's like, well, of course I did, right? I had really high hopes. I hope that none of them will lose control. I just want to help them out because, again, we are comrades, we're teammates. We face danger together. So why should I hide the truth from them? But of course, I didn't tell the clerks because they really have nothing to do with all of this Beyonders shenanigans aside from, being pencil pushers. That was mean, but it's the truth, guys. Honestly, the clerks, I feel like they're living their best life. First and foremost, they probably don't have much to do anyway because, again, the Beyonder shenanigans, the magical stuff, doesn't really happen all that often. And if they do, it's like really interval, like it's not that often, except because of Klein. Klein is the reason Roseanne is doing overtime. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So anyway, Krastet tells Klein that he passed the test, but he has to be sworn in, that he doesn't tell people about the acting method. And Klein's like, easy, no problem. And he was thinking to himself, well, I might not be able to teach the others the acting method, but I can let Miss Justice and Mr. Hankman do the teaching instead, like that's the reason why they're there after all. Also, he has the son, and the son knows about the acting method, and he's just spewing all of these hints and tips around because he doesn't know any better. Anyways, that was chapters 162 and 166. I know I really glossed over a lot of things here, but I feel like there are a lot of things that doesn't really need to be mentioned in these chapters. I did like it, kind of, but at the same time, I also like the fact that I can have a comparison in my mind between the novel and the donghua, and I can actually start seeing the difference that the directors took in the donghua. Because what do you mean Leonard, Kenley, and Roseanne wasn't actually part of, the investigation towards Old Neil, and it was just Royal, Klein, and Captain Dunes? Like, what? And when I was reading that, I was thinking, hey, were the animators actually just flexing their budget and saying that, hey, look, we have all of these characters in this one area, one section, just because? And it's also really fascinating to me how they switch around so many stuff later on. Like this, I feel like this is like still in the middle of the series. There's still a bunch of chapters that I have to read, but we are getting through to the end soon. And I am excited for that, especially excited about the politician stuff that's going to happen in the donghua, right? With the witch, and again, the highlight of the show, basically. I am very, very curious in how that will actually unfold, and if we actually learn about the story more through their eyes, basically. What do you guys think about this episode? Like, all the storyline, the changes in the dong? Tell me about it. Before I go, please leave a like, subscribe, and a comment. It helps my channel out a lot. My commissions are once again open, and my Vision link is down in the description below. Check out my story, Dreaming of Aurora, if you have the time. And finally, thanks to my patrons, Robek, Van Eric, and J. Volchevalitska for the support. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!